preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
I hadn't realized that your appearance would play such a large role in the whole thing. I mean, I had not really thought that much about my appearance since I was in school. You know, I was getting by based on other things. Then I became an actor when I was about 35. All of a sudden, the agent said, well, you know, you're a character man. In effect, you know, look in the mirror. You're not a full human who would be the hero of a story. You can only be the kind of person who appears and oddly interrupts the life of that character. And I fought with the agent over the course of many years about this because he said, well, you know, you have to choose. I mean, if you put yourself, because you're allowed to choose. Mm-hmm. I mean, they don't tell you which half of the book you can choose if you insist, but you're making a mockery of yourself if you make the wrong choice, because you will not be, you know, the part, they'll just laugh. They will not give you the part as the leading man, and then when they're looking through the character men, you will not be there.
But this has always been a blurred situation. I mean, you're saying largely that what you do is determined by how you look, but maybe 30 years ago when Rock Hudson and Tab Hunter were stars, the looks were more important. But now we have Al Pacino, Gene Hackman, Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, not classically handsome character actors who became leading actors, or what they call them, leading men. Although I'm having a harder time coming up with a woman to put on that list. I think with women, looks still really matter, don't they? For example, somebody who might have been a character actress, Meryl Streep, is still a very good-looking woman. She's not as odd-looking as Robert De Niro or Al Pacino or Dustin Hoffman.
How can we compare these things?
Well, often it's the question of when if I'm often greeted on the street, people come up to me and they look at me for a long, stunned moment, and a tiny frown appears here, and they say, who are you? And then I would say, if I'm feeling good, I would say, I'm Fritz Weaver, and they'd say, no, that's not it. But my favorite anecdote about that is the time I got home from California, and I was in Kennedy Airport and jumped into a cab and settled back. I was jet lagged and very tired, and all of a sudden I was aware of two eyes in the mirror looking at me, and the same little frown appeared here and the puzzled look, and I knew that I was in for a long taxi ride home. But I closed my eyes because I was very tired and I wasn't feeling particularly social. So I became aware that the cab was lurching and swerving around the road, and these eyes were still in the rearview mirror. I really began to be afraid that I was not going to get home. And finally, we pull up at my building, and he throws on the brakes, turns around triumphantly, and says, "Fritz Weaver." And I said, "Right, yes." And he said, "I knew it. I'm big on trivia," he said. Very chastening experience.
Well, some character actors like Max Wright work all the time, and yet people rarely recognize their faces. At least in your cases, people do recognize you.
Yeah.
Even if it's because they're
well,
big on trivia.
If you disappear into the role, as we try to, I think, they don't associate you with a particular kind of thing, so they're a little puzzled by it.
You know who I think of that way is Chris Plummer, who plays leading roles like maybe Royal Hunt of the Sun. And I went and I'm watching this, and I don't see Chris Plummer, and of course he's been on the stage the whole time, but totally disappeared into the role. I don't know whether there are really many people quite like that. No, I don't know. You'd call him a leading man, really. I don't know. It's one of those categories that has very little to do with us. Don't you think? It has to do with the other.
Where did you decide to put your photo in the book? Where did you decide to put your photo in the book?
Leading ladies.
And Fritz?
I did the same thing, and I played them. But I think every actor is a character actor. I don't know how you can break that down. The British, you mentioned Chris. The British have a whole system whereby a glorious-looking man like the young Laurence Olivier would have been first a juvenile and then a leading man, had to transform himself into a character actor in order to be a great actor. The path of acting lay in the direction of a whole series of false noses and crepe hair and all kinds of things that he had to do. He had to disappear and become somebody else before he was recognized. And I think the British system does that more. They tend to favor the repertory kind of experience.
We don't have that opportunity. But in my case, you know, it was like very important in New York for me to, being a commercial actress and a Broadway actress, really, that was what I aimed for, because when I was a kid, that was what one did. One went to New York to be a Broadway actress, to get my name over the title and so on. So for me, it had to do with being a big success, whereas you think of a character actor as being sort of a secondary person, as Wally has brought up, and I've been able to play both, like this Paul Zindel play in Miss Reardon Drinks a Little. Myself and Julie Harris and Nancy Marchand, well, we're all characters, but, you know, we're over the title, so we were leading actors. Like Julie is really a character actress.
Well, Wally was the star of Uncle Vanya. He was both the star and a character actor, and it was a wonderful performance.
I think he did the best Vanya I've ever seen.
The best Vanya ever.
Please.
This man.
Estelle, I read somewhere that you first were interested in politics, and then you worked on the Today Show for many years before you actually got into acting.
Yes. I grew up in, you know, an intellectual New England family where, I mean, one just didn't go on the stage. And
but you'd always wanted to?
So I thought I'd do something else. Well, I worked in community theater all my life, and in summers from school, I always worked in the theater, but I had a very hard decision, which I'm still making at the end of my life, whether I can be in the theater, because do grown-ups really do that?
Yes, right.
So I tried real life, and I just hated it. And I still do.
Well, it's losing yourself in another character. Originally, you do it probably because, in many cases, I'm not speaking for you, but many, Lynn Redgrave told me that when she first started acting, she didn't like herself very much, and so it was really a relief to become other people. But as she got older and she came to like herself a lot more, she discovered she still loved becoming other people.
Yeah.
I'm sure that actors have to go through that thinking that through again and again. You know, what am I doing here? I know why I did it once, but what's the reason now? And the reason is you're enjoying it.
Well, the beauty of being an actor, I can say this now because I'm basically this year not acting. I'm working over at the Actors Studio on producing and directing. But the beauty of being an actor is you really don't have to deal with anybody else. You really have a responsibility to your character, and that's it. And I mean, you can be a nice, cordial person, but you don't really have to think about other people and what are they thinking and what do they want. Most of the time, the other people in the play with you, it's your imagination. You're not married to Fritz or whatever, you know. And so it's partly Fritz and partly your imagination. So you don't really have to like look at other people and deal with them and talk to them. You have the words written down and you can just create this person that you love and you're proud of and all. It's a very different and for me, wonderful life. I really love it.
How long before you got to that point? Because you started off here you were working on the Today Show, and you
Yeah.
you started doing some reviews, and your first Broadway show Happy Hunting was that Ethel Merman and Fernando Lamas?
Yeah, with Ethel Merman and Fernando Lamas. Yeah, I always
I actually saw
sang.
you in
I
that.
sang with bands, and I sang in cocktail lounges and played the piano and that kind of thing. So
That's a long way from that to the
I would
actor
never
studio.
think to be an actor. I don't know how people become actors. I mean, I just don't know how they do it. But I could sing, and I could usually sing better than 9 out of the 10 people who were auditioning. So I didn't have any trouble getting jobs.
So when did you realize that there were serious roles for you as well?
No, I just fell into it. I still feel much closer to music than I do to straight acting. I love music. And that's, I love great literature because it's closer to music. I'm not much for new plays or prose or that kind of thing.
Wally, you were a latecomer to acting as well. You have history and philosophy degrees from Harvard and Oxford. Then you taught and wrote. Are those good training for becoming an actor?
You taught and wrote?
Boy, I don't know. That's a very hard question, and it would be so boring for me to actually try to figure it out, because I would just sit here and think for an hour.
Well, you say you got into acting accidentally.
Well, I mean, I think that it's people who hire actors are kind of pleased to see a face that doesn't look like an actor. So in a way, it's and obviously, to some extent, an actor analyzes life or tries to express some understanding of life. So presumably there's some value in living a little bit outside of the theater before you get into it, because maybe you developed a few insights. Because it is, I agree with Estelle that once you're in it and you actually are acting, it is very different from real life. I wouldn't put it in the same way that you did. I would say that you are having real relationships with other people while the play is going on, but they're very carefully prepared, because there's you've rehearsed it, you've sort of done something like it before, the lines are written, so you have this very special chance to relive moments, which is what everybody is always going around saying, God, if only I could do that differently. I mean, in life, you can't. In
But
a play,
as Uncle Vanya, you fail every night.
well, there is
Yeah.
there is the, you're stuck with the circumstances of the play, and it's true that sometimes it's depressing to play a depressing part, because you think, Jesus Christ, I'm going in there one more time to lose. That's what you think on the way to the play.
But you could always grab her and kiss her and say, the heck with Chekhov.
But then, when you're actually in the play, you're not thinking about the way it's going to end. You're thinking about the moment that you're actually experiencing, and you do get a chance to try in a different way the next night, and maybe you will win after all.
My wife, who's sitting out in the audience here, a wonderful actress, she says that for her, the theater is time out. It's you live your life all day long, and then you drop it all at the stage door, and you have this wonderful sensation of going into a different life with a different set of tensions and problems. And then you resume your life at the end of the evening, and it's not always a pleasant surprise. So I've never been able to achieve that, because I tend to take problems into the theater and then carry the theater out into life, which confuses everybody. When I played Hamlet, I think my wife said, "It's not easy to live with Hamlet." It is not.
You actually didn't make it into the films until you were in your 30s. What had you been doing before?
What was I doing before? I was.
You weren't teaching philosophy, like
No. I never got that far. I was at the University of Chicago, and I tried every department there. I was in the history department, and I got thrown out of the history department because I read Thomas Carlyle's History of the French Revolution, and that was you were not allowed to do that at the University of Chicago. And then and I realized he did me a favor because that's pure drama, that book, and I had no business in the history department. I was interested in stories and storytelling. What was I doing? Well, I was on the stage mostly in the regional theater, and then I came to New York, and first time, I guess I was 30. How did you know that?
Well, I can do a little mathematics. And like Estelle, you've done musicals and serious roles, like the variety as well. Do you miss the singing?
I played Sherlock Holmes, and the elementary deduction I made from that is that I didn't belong in musicals.
But you did My Fair Lady later.
I did My Fair Lady, yeah. I wore his clothes, Rex Harrison.
Really?
And which tightly fit me into a performance that I didn't want to give. But there I was with a little hat and his clothes, and it was more or less tailor-made to him, too. So that it was if you actually attempted to sing those songs, you would be hooted off the stage. Mm-hmm. You have to speak them the way he did. I enjoyed it, though. I enjoyed it.
Wally, have you ever been tempted to do a musical?
Well, I was in one, but oddly, we all asked to be fired.
How odd.
It was a very strange story, but all of the actors, it was sort of like the French Revolution, all of the actors were seized by a strange emotion, I would say, on a specific day, about, 3 weeks into the rehearsal, and we sort of we started talking backstage, and we said, let's just go to Joe Papp and ask him to fire all of us and to drop the project. And so it was we didn't know why we felt that way. We loved the music, we loved the songs that we were singing, and in a way, I look back on it as an absolutely wonderful experience, and it's a little hard to remember what the problem was, but
did Joe Papp do what you asked him
Yes,
to do?
he did. I mean, we sent a message, said we'd like to meet with you. We said we just, we don't want to go on. It's unbearable for us.
Great stuff.
Now, neither of you have ever. I'm sure you've done some pretty awful things and thought, well, I'll do it, but you never formed a union and quit, right?
No. I admire you very much for having done that, but there's something else that takes over in many cases, which is it's a challenge. I've got to make this work, otherwise I'm no good. So that takes over with me usually. I've never been able to do what Nicole Williamson did. And he stepped off after one act of Hamlet, he walked to the audience and said, I'm sorry, I'm not giving a good performance, I'm going home. and that was the opening night, too. And the next day, the reviewer said, oh, my God, we loved so much what he was doing. Imagine how wonderful he would have been if he had gone on with it. And I thought, oh, that's really cheating, I think. You gotta get out and do it, I think. No matter how you feel, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
But
Well, what
doing it in
happened to me
rehearsal,
was I unfortunately have done not many classics, wonderful things, but I did a lot of flop musicals when I started out, well, 3 or 4. And it was the strangest thing because you'd find you'd be humming these tunes that you knew from the first day were terrible, and you'd get to love it. And you know how people are in flop shows. They carry on the sidewalk and they want the show to continue and all that. Because you get into something really, really awful, and since you've got to try to make it work, you begin to think it's wonderful. You lose your perspective altogether.
Well, you're no good unless you do believe
Yeah.
in it and think it's great.
But this is not just musicals, flop musicals. This is all movies and all theater. You know, you see this terrible film and you wonder, didn't they know this was a disaster? And then I've spoken to directors who've said, well, to be honest, I was worried about how that dolly shot was moving and whether the sun was in the right place and whether the actor was coming into the, coming onto the right spot at the right moment. And I really didn't see all of those other terrible things until it was in the editing room.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure acting, you do that too.
Yeah, you can easily take a lot of things for granted. That you read the script, you know the terrible truths sometimes on the first time, when you've read it, and then you can sort of take that for granted and put that aside and go on from there.
It's like meeting somebody and then having an affair. Sometimes at the beginning this is going to be a disaster, but you proceed, and at the end, when it's in shambles, you say, I knew this the first time we met. Why did I forget it?
But
Tell us
true,
about
right?
this. Leonard.
Well, we only have 50 minutes here, and I don't know if I have enough money, Doctor. But I'm sure you've experienced that, haven't you? When you were much younger? Estelle was laughing.
I'm sure we have.
I can't remember. No, I tend to live in the moment. I don't tend to think whether something's going to work out or not. If it suits me this minute, I jump into it, and then I don't really think historically. I'm just learning to do that.
But what about what Wally was just saying? You read the script and you think, gee, this isn't very good, but it's a part. I need the money, right? Or it's the right director or the right studio. So I'll do it.
Well, what happens to me a lot is it's funny because when Wally says that about a character being not a full human being or something other than the leading parts, because I lots of times read a script and I get fascinated by somebody in it that I think I'd really like to try to be. And the script itself may be terrible and the story may be terrible. And I'm no judge of that. But if I get really interested in somebody in it, and I really want to see, can I create that person in it? So I don't really think whether the thing's good or bad. But frankly, I've made my life in bad plays. I'm just awfully good at making bad plays interesting for a night, anyway. That's how I've spent my life, because that's frankly what most American dramatic literature is, in my opinion. Barely worth doing. Not to mention movies. I don't know how people in the movies can bear to do the work they do. It's just so. I mean, I don't know. I'm much too cultured to be in this business, as my companions are. I wouldn't say that in every group, but my companions are extremely cultured. And I don't know what we're doing in showbiz, frankly.
Absolutely. Amen. It's, but I do find I'm getting really cantankerous now. I mean, a script will come and I will pitch it across the room. I will step on it and tear it to shreds, because what are they asking us to do? And I don't really recognize the current theater. I don't want to get philosophical here, but I mean, the current theater doesn't speak to me at all. And the movies, they stopped speaking to me 25 years ago. So,
I think.
Go ahead.
Well, for me, there's a. On the one hand, there are scripts that are so evil and wrong that I decide not to do them, which is the majority of the things that ever come my way. I just know that if I tried to do it, I would be so self-hating that I would feel that I would become ill. I'd just be sick. I couldn't do it. So those get put to one side. Then the others, which may be really idiotic or stupid, I decide, yeah, this is really stupid, but I am going to do this one. Hasn't crossed that line of harmfulness and evil that is so extreme that I'm not going to do it. I am going to do it. So then I put the fact that it's idiotic aside, really, and I, either leap into it purely on the basis of instinct and trying to have fun, or if it's slightly on the serious side, one does have a situation that is real, whether it is well written or badly written. If you're the uncle who is driving to Las Vegas with your 2 nephews after the nuclear holocaust, that is a real situation which is extremely difficult to try to portray. And so, it takes 100% of one's intelligence and ability to try to make that believable. And, you don't have time to be thinking, is the guy who wrote this a good writer,
No, that should happen before you do the role.
Right.
But when you're doing it, you suspend everything and try to make it work.
Yeah. And it's always, I have never found even one easy scene, really. I mean, I find that in a way, it takes my full ability to do even the scene that I get up in the morning, if it's a movie, say, and I think, well, God knows this is going to be an easy day. All I have to do is go in there, and the boss is sitting behind his desk, and I have to say, Mr. Jones, do you really think we need to buy those pretzels? And that's all I have to do today. And when you get there, you sort of think, oh, well, how would I say that? And it isn't really that.
Who am I?
It's not really that easy. And by the time you've done it, you've expended quite a bit of, passion.
Psychic energy.
On it.
Yeah.
Well,
You're not thinking about judging it at that point.
But I wonder whether you think that, as some do, that the character roles are often better written, more interesting, because you get to play the villains, you get to play the quirky, eccentric types rather than just the good hero types. So in talking about this with some friends, they all felt that was true, that if you really were a serious actor, you'd want these kinds of roles. And then somebody else said, most of the character parts are the ones that are underwritten. It's, they're the ones where they don't do much, and the actors have to provide all of the real humanness. I get the feeling, Wally, you're saying the second, that they're underwritten, but is that your experience? You think that the character roles are often the meatier ones?
I think they are, and they offer a peculiar sort of temptation to the actor. When I was young, I used to do a lot of those really awful people, heads of mafias and gangsters, and
you always seem to be the government guy involved in the conspiracy.
Yes, the government guy involved in the conspiracy with a smooth external and underneath all kinds of wickedness going on. But the temptation is always when you play those things was to think, oh, this is so different from me. I will really throw myself into this, and I can park my own psyche to one side and really do it. The odd thing that happens is that as you go on working on a part like that, you begin to discover more and more of yourself in this evil person you're playing. By the end of the run, you are the person. And despise yourself for it.
Better to play Hamlet.
Hamlet is, that's the one that finds us out.
So what happens? Your wife really gets upset when you
This is
come
my
home
first
after-
wife, not my present wife. Yeah.
I think it's a little different for women. I think that leading roles for women are women who are sexual, desirable to, we're second-class citizens anyway. I mean, we want men to desire us, let's put it that way. I have a little different point of view. And the leading roles for women are usually more conventionally beautiful or unconventionally beautiful and very gifted, like Barbra Streisand. And the other roles tend to be non-sexual. Oh, occasionally a prostitute, like this last of the Mobile Hotshots, which I played in Tennessee Williams' 7 Descents of Myrtle. But for the most part, they tend to be non-sexual. I remember going through a period in my life where I got script after script after script of what we call Marjorie Main parts. The person who's really unattractive to look at, and a non-sexual person. Men don't want her hardly even as a friend, but she could do the cooking or something. So I think for women it's a little different. And then also it was different, I think, this leading role and character thing too. The leading roles I played when I was younger tended to be really boring. Even the lead in My Fair Lady, which I did, I found not so interesting. I mean, I liked the music and all, but it was all like so, I don't know, it's a brilliant musical, perfect. But I found doing it not nearly as interesting as, for instance, Mrs. Peachum and Threepenny, or Jenny and Threepenny, and I think it used to be that leading ladies were attractive and the character people were not. Now we had Philip Roth or whatever in the anti-hero. Now we have anti-heroes who are leading men, like Gene Hackman played my husband in Bonnie and Clyde, and Warren Beatty and Faye played the, so to say, leading in the book, they'd be leading man and lady. And now you have Gene Hackman being the leading man playing with Sharon Stone. So you see, for men it's changed. But for women, I mean, Gene Hackman is my age, but now he's playing the lover of Sharon Stone, and I'm offered his or Jack Lemmon's grandmother in something. So it's a totally different bag, I think.
I was going to
for a
mention
woman.
Harrison Ford, who has been getting older before our eyes, but his leading ladies always remain about the same age, around 21, 22. In the old days, that was different because the stars of the 30s, the women stars of the 30s, continued to be stars. Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, Katharine Hepburn, way into their 50s and 60s, Ingrid Bergman. And today, you get the feeling that when Julia Roberts hits 40, she's in trouble. She'd better learn how to act.
Well, I think many of the people in the audience may never have seen a movie script, and you can't even imagine the way people are described in the scripts by the writers. I mean, a character, when you talk about our parts underwritten or not, it literally says, Jane comes into the bar. Wow, what a piece of ass. She's unbelievable. I mean, that's literally the description of the character. Or for the, the last part that I played in a movie, it said, a science geek of the worst possible kind. So, and I said to the director, wow, I guess it's really up to me to figure out how to interpret that. I said, you can't really act that in itself. And I actually have collected some wonderful ones, where people say, Wally, they're really interested in you for this part. They just think you would be perfect to play the role of Herbert. And then you leaf through the thing and says, Herbert comes into the room. A little light bulb with a little squeaking fringe and then it, you can't, that's
Horrible.
Yeah, but it's not just the scriptwriters. Estelle, Leonard Maltin in his movie encyclopedia describes you as an edgy character actress best suited to playing shrill neurotics and wild-eyed fanatics. That's because he must have loved you in Bonnie and Clyde and Rachel, but still, you've had a bigger career than that.
Are you going to read us all? Well,
Maltin was. I'm not going to read Wally's and.
No, please.
But I think they said something like, about you, Fritz, underused, but always wonderful in every role. Oh. I think Ephraim Katz said that about you.
Man of great taste. Who said that?
Ephraim Katz in his encyclopedia of movies.
The truth is that in an absolutely ideal world, which I don't know. I visited the Bergman's Theater in Sweden. It seemed terribly nice to me. Maybe that wasn't the ideal world. I did meet an actor there who complained bitterly about it, so maybe it wasn't that perfect. But in an ideal world, an actor would play lots and lots of parts that really, at first, the guy who writes the encyclopedia would never think would be appropriate. Because actually then you would come up with truly fascinating things all the time. If you were cast again and again against what people think your type is, very interesting interpretations would come about, because actually there are no, all people have quite a bit to them, and all actors have quite a bit to them.
You're talking about the repertory system, really, which we don't have. It's the country is not hospitable to repertory. I don't know why that is. Partly because they have so many choices on Broadway that they don't want to go to a single theater and see the same actor play 5 different parts, which of course would be wonderful.
Well, we all have a whole different attitude toward actors. You mentioned Bergman's Theater. Bibi Andersson, his great star, told me that that when she went to Hollywood the first time, she was in a Western, and she arrived on the set, on location, and everyone was arguing over the size of their mobile home. And she said, this was a big shock to me, because Ingmar would have said, sit over there in the sun and be quiet until I call you. And there never would have been any concern about how good the air conditioner was. There was no air conditioner. On the other hand, she was really allowed to act in those things. And in the Western, what did she get to do? So do you think that part of the problem is that we just have a different idea about what acting is in this country?
Well, one thing I have been aware of about American actors, present company accepted, actors want to be loved in this country for some reason. I don't know why that is, but even if you're playing a terrible character, you want somehow to make the audience understand and therefore love him. And I think it's terrible. I mean, why should we care whether we're loved or not? We should play these parts for the truth of what they are and let the chips fall where they may. But I've noticed that more and more in American actors. The European actors are much more willing to design roles in terms of bringing out some leading idea about the character rather than to say, do you love me and I want your sympathy.
That may be because we all grew up with those television shows in the 50s, those dramas in which right near the end, the villain would say before he died, "My mother never loved me."
Yes, exactly,
you know, and
exactly.
so we understood
Yes, exactly.
why this person had done all these evil things. He had his little moment for explaining himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Dr. Freud.
But I think, too, that the people who are loved make more money. I think there is an economic basis to
Glad
all
we got
this.
to this.
You know, I personally think that acting is like playing the piano. To be really good at it, you need to do it all the time. And I also think in this country that because film and TV are so far away and one can make a living there, and these days one really can't make a living just in the theater. Certainly a woman can't. I mean, I don't feel that I can. The most interesting work is done off Broadway or somewhere else. And I mean, Eli Wallach is now making $1,000 a week. That's $52,000 a year, and he's one of our very leading actors. So that isn't exactly what CEOs are making, or even vice presidents, or anybody on Wall Street. So, and we don't ever get to do it. So we never really get much better than what we do in movies and TV anymore, because we don't get to work. And the whole point of that thing in Sweden and playing all these parts all the time, that's like playing the piano. If you don't practice a sonata, after a month, it sounds different. And so the acting profession in this country is, I don't know, it's not really a profession because we don't have an understanding of it. We don't have a government and a population that appreciates it. We don't have a cultural tradition at all. I mean, I grew up, I love it. I love nature. I don't think go to a museum. I think go look at the river, for my cultural nourishment, so to say, because I grew up where there wasn't any, and an awful lot of people in America grow up the same way. So it's all a terrible mess. And we should have this repertory system. We should understand that we have to have a theater. We have Lincoln Center, which is what it is. But we should understand that we have to have a system where actors work all the time. We have to make a distinction between people who are in the theater for life, committed to the theater as we are, and Wally with his extraordinary gift of writing, which of course I only act myself, but we should have an understanding and a responsibility in our own community and in the community at large. We don't have that at all. I mean, anybody casting a Broadway show will take the latest flash in the pan. And I'll be standing there, and this happened to me in my 30s, maybe only once or twice, but it was obvious to me that people who are in the theater, Hal Prince and all the big directors and producers, really were not going to say, oh, Estelle could play that part, or Miriam could play that part. Miriam being somebody who was clearly not going to spend her life in the theater, was clearly not committed to the community, you see. And that's essentially what we have. We have people kind of picking whoever's going to be hot. We don't have a responsibility as directors and producers, and the actors don't have an opportunity to work all the time, which is what we need to work toward. And I think in our choices, we try to do that. We work everywhere, the three of us, and try to do what we can. But it's a very, it's not a good situation.
You're destroying my
I'm not a
fantasies.
depressed person. I'm trying to say all this cheerfully, but I think it is the truth.
Oh, and if young people ask me about becoming an actor, I am always extremely discouraging about it because, if to be an unsuccessful actor is obviously depressing. To not ever work, that's awful. But in this country, to become a successful actor means, that you get to do worthless trash and it's ultimately not nourishing. It's not satisfying beyond a certain point, if that is, and in a way, the leading actors almost have it the worst, because the most successful, not speaking of leading, but the really successful leading actors in movies do things that are just so idiotic you can't even, that ultimately are not nourishing.
They're trapped in the particular role they're playing, and they have to keep it up.
Yeah.
And they study the ratings, and they study the whoever is getting the big salary of this year and the last year. I always like what Jimmy Stewart was reported to have said. Somebody said, "Yeah, but Mr. Stewart, you always play Jimmy Stewart." And he said, "Who do you want me to play, Jimmy Cagney?" But he was trapped in that way too. I heard him say that.
But that's one of the nice things about being a character actor, isn't it? As long as you're successful. For example, Estelle, you could go in and play, was it Bev Harris? I remember it was Bev Harris, Roseanne's mother. You didn't have to do every show. You could do a few, and you even got at one time, I think, to play Roseanne herself as an older person. So that gave you at least a chance to do a little more. I'm not saying these were challenging parts, but you go in there, you make a lot of money, and then and that can subsidize doing really interesting things, doesn't it?
How much money do you make?
Not as much as I should have, being from New York, and not caring about money. Certainly not as much as I should have. No, well, quite frankly, I think it's really stupid and ridiculous. It was a time in my life when I had family obligations, and I just couldn't do 8 shows a week, which is, for me, a total commitment. I mean, I don't have a real life before and after. If I'm doing a play and it's a difficult role, I usually spend the day in bed, and I don't really have an energy for anything except preparing for the evening. And then after is the best time, and of course by then your family's gone to sleep. So I took that TV job. It's ridiculous. I mean, I'd go out. Look, it was very good for my career. It kept my face in the limelight, so to say, or whatever it's kept in.
It was the number one show on television at the time.
Get offers to do other things, but to just stand there and say maybe 4 lines a week is not really what I expect a person of my gift to end up doing when she's 60 years old. I would expect to be playing in plays, playing wonderful parts. I always thought when I got to be 40, I would understand Shakespeare and Chekhov and Ibsen and Strindberg and be able to do them and really work on them and do them well. And of course, I don't get the opportunity once in a while here and there, So it doesn't turn out in this country for me to be the kind of life that, we're all highly educated and we are not. It's not, what is it? It's fun. It's a vacation. It's a lifetime vacation.
I got the feeling you were saying the same thing, Wally. And you've done a lot of them. Murphy Brown, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, The Nanny, The Cosby Show, Taxi. You had a recurring role in Clueless, right?
Yeah, well, for me, that stuff has been incredible fun because it's, I do something else so that I don't depend on that for my full spiritual nourishment, I would say.
Well, you use acting to pay for your playwriting.
Well, I love being in those things. I mean, to play,
they're fun. They're fun. They're vacation.
It's a wonderful thing to do for fun, but it is. I mean, what's wrong with being an American actor is that the what we're saying, I guess, is really the material that is there, and that somehow, unless you're unbelievably clever about figuring out how to control your own life, start your own theater company or God knows what, which is almost impossible to do unless you have that kind of talent. You end up doing material that represents stupid ideas and bad values, and there's something wrong with that. Although the actor always sort of has an out in that it's possible to I don't know if it's true or if you're kidding yourself, but to some extent you can say,
I didn't write this stuff.
I am going to play a professor in a small community college, and my assignment is that I'm going to go in there, and one of my students is a criminal, and I'm going to be offer him a word of advice. That's what the scene is for today, and this is an appalling script representing the lowest possible values, but I'm going to, in the most dignified way possible, represent my character, and I'm going to, try to do my job with some dignity.
And Fritz, you felt that way when you were playing a space alien on X-Files?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing there was I went on the first day I arrived, and I said, just tell me one thing. I said to the director, am I a good guy or a bad guy? This is the X-Files, and nobody understands those plots. And the director said, don't ask me, I'm only directing part one. And he said, ask that fellow over there. You see that fellow standing over there? He's directing part two. So I went over and I said, I just want to know one thing. Am I a good guy or a bad guy in this? And he said, don't ask me. It hasn't been written yet. So I played it sort of this way. It was interesting, actually, because that's what we do in life, in a way. We don't set out to be bad guys. We set out to, driven by self-interest or whatever it is.
But I always think of Fritz as I very much admire this prestigious, wonderful career he's had. I don't think he's like Wally and me.
I don't feel that way at all.
Really?
No.
Well, you've all had your great moments.
Of course.
And looking over
you don't think
your
what
careers,
Wally
all
and
of
I
you have
think,
had
do you?
wonderful things.
I do. I think I've been sitting here nodding like that German doll that does that. Because I reckon I hear the ring of truth in everything you say.
There is a difference, by the way, between your experience and Wally's, because the last time Wally was on my show, he came down to my radio show, as he was walking down the street, a limousine stopped, and Bette Midler burst out of the door and she screamed, Wallace Shawn, I've always wanted to meet you.
There you go.
Isn't that true? Now, you had the cab driver who was trying to figure out who you were. He has Bette Midler.
You see?
And she had the limousine. He didn't have the limousine. He was walking down the street at the time.
That's the supreme accolade.
Did you, Bette Midler?
Bette Midler. She never said that to me. Did she say that?
Have you ever met Bette?
No,
Wally, was that an exciting moment?
Well, that was very exciting. I didn't tell this story, by the way. It was actually observed by someone on Leonard's staff, and I was flabbergasted that he knew about it. But it is true.
Well, you see, but that's the supreme. That is the area in which we find our nourishment. Because, I mean, if you take William Faulkner, for example, now, or James Joyce, how many people have actually read Ulysses? Very, very few.
All the way through, you mean?
All the way through. I had to, because I've had to read it every year at Symphony Space. And it was a trial. It was a wonderful book, and I'm glad I did it. But the point is, there are very few people who will recognize what you do. And those who do, there's your reward right there.
Well, I think that is a very good thing about being an actor, that you, if anybody, well, in theater, it's the best of all, because if they like you, they are actually there. And if you like to be appreciated, or you have a need to be appreciated, which I would say probably most actors do, something terribly nice about the fact that they're actually there and they are appreciating you in your own presence. It's totally wonderful. The movie thing gets into the bizarre. I mean, it's wonderful to be appreciated in a way, but it can get into, well, as you say, when the person is snapping his fingers trying to figure out who you are, it's a bizarre combination of flattering and unflattering.
And it's not really a respect for your work. It's so true about how you're looked at if you're in films or because it is really wonderful when someone has come to see a show and you meet them in the shoe store and they say, oh, I saw blah, 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 and you feel wonderful. You have a communication with a human. And when I got in the movies, people start treating you like a box of cereal. They don't mind what they come up to you and interrupt, but you're their commodity.
Even when you won the Oscar?
Oh, you're a commodity for people. I think it's just a subconscious thing. It's like when you're on television, you get in an elevator with people and they think you're a friend. They always say, like after I got on Roseanne, everybody I meet, they smile, I say hi, and I say hi. And then if the thing goes on long enough, they say, were you at Charlie's last Saturday? And I say, no, and then, say, I think I'm an actress. And they say, oh, I see. But television has that quality to it, friends. And the movies has like, you're a box of cereal. I mean, you really are expected to respond to them as if they bought a ticket to meet you, which they didn't, of course. They went to a movie you were in. I think it's purely unconscious with the people. And as Wally says, it's a shared experience in that you were there and they were there, and they somehow treat you with this respect because they've been with you when you did it. Look, people don't know. People who go to the movies, they don't know what we go through. They don't know they need to respect us. I never forget, I was stand-in for Ava Gardner, a job when I was going to law school up there in New England. And there was a stand-in for Clark Gable, and there was a stand-in for Ava Gardner. That was me. And we were taken to this location in Danvers, Massachusetts, in a limousine. And when we got there, the limousine was charged by people from the community because they thought it was Clark Gable and Ava Gardner. And it was an introduction for me to this world, where literally they charged the car. We could not get out of the car. They weren't hostile or anything. This was back in the 50s, But it was an incredible thing. Now that just doesn't happen to you when you're working in the theater for some reason. It's just different, isn't it? Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
So, Estelle, even though you had those incredible successes in films like Bonnie and Clyde and Rachel, you really feel that your greatest moments as an actress have been on the stage?
Well, as I say, I don't call them acting. I call them vacations. I have the ability to move 500, 1,000 people, without a microphone, in a room, keep them glued to something, take them on an imaginary trip for a couple of hours. I feel that that's an extraordinary talent that I have. Not everybody in the world can do that. And I was born with it, and I've tried to develop it, as well as I can. Not as well as Fritz, but as well as... I don't have a voice like his, But, and that is my real work, and that is my real life. And the others are just these great fun vacations where you wonder what all the smart people are doing out there. And the fact is they're all into money and power, which are two things that don't interest me. I really love to, work on the stage. That's my life.
Same for you, Fritz?
Yeah. It's it is an immediate thing in the theater, and it has immediately gratifying.
You've also gotten to do some great roles. You played Shakespeare, you played Arthur Miller, you were in the Chalk Garden, won the Tony for that. And in the films, you often are in these really stupid things, or you're, as I said, you're the villain, you're the Nazi, you're the guy with the secret fascist.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you're a nice
when
person.
my kids were growing up, they would come home often in tears from school and say, "Your daddy is a horrible man," And I thought, it's time for me to change my image, if only to rescue my self-image to my children. But I have this experience you've had where people come up and say, "Where do I know you from?" And sometimes they get very perverse about it, and I say, "You don't know?" And they would look at me and I'd say, "No, I don't know. Where was it?" "I was your algebra teacher." That's sort of theater. That's play acting. I kind of enjoy that. But that's perverse. That's terrible.
Wally, most of your successes, again, have been in film. It's interesting to ask people what they think of, when they think of Wallace Shawn. Some talk about the Woody Allen films. Others immediately say The Princess Bride. Others, My Dinner with Andre, and Atlantic City. Are those films the things that you remember best?
Well, for me, if I had thought I was going to be an actor, I would have studied how to be an actor, and I would have trained, and I would have learned certain things.
Yeah.
Do you think they should teach a course in what to do when you become an actor?
Well, I mean, I believe that there's quite a bit to learn. I have never thought of myself as a, complete actor. I got into it very late, and partly because I don't have certain technical skills, I quite like the part of movie acting, which is that the camera comes to you, and it's the camera's job to sort of bring your performance to the audience. So, I mean, to put it mildly about the voice, not only do I not have your voice, I'm much happier just speaking the way I speak and not having to sell it to the people out there. So for me, it's very relaxing to be in movies, and I like the fact that you can be very, very intimate, very, very quiet, very, very subtle, and without having any particular technique with which to present that subtlety to a theater audience. The camera can discover it, and you can look okay. So I must say, I do like acting in the movies.
That's a
and
blessing.
I've had a wonderful time doing that.
Wally, what you say is a blessing, really. What you're saying is that you are still Wallace Shawn in front of the camera. And I, unlike you, always want the camera to move back. I don't want him to move in. I think you expect to get the truth this close, you're getting nothing. You're looking up my nose. Go back out there and you'll get some truth, because I express myself that way. But now, in the process, I've lost what you never lost, which is, I played Shakespeare, and I have lost the ability. I don't know how I talked 35 years ago when I was in Pittsburgh. I don't know how I talk anymore. I have lost that ability to communicate just pure thought without technical instrument like the voice.
No, Wally, when you played Vanya, do you think that it was helpful that you didn't do it before an audience, even though you did it as a theatrical piece, because you could get that intimate with the camera?
Well, that particular piece I think if you like it, then you have to say that we could not have first done that for 1,000 people and then made the movie do well. I don't think it would have worked too well. We did do it many, 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 many times for 20 people. But when we tried once to do it for 40 people, and it was too many people for what we were doing because they couldn't hear us. I mean, the people in the back, I mean, the last 10 people were very disappointed. They couldn't hear what we were saying. And I think if we had learned how to do it for hundreds of people, if indeed we ever could have, I think we would have formed habits that would have made it impossible to do that particular movie.
Yeah, I think things would have happened to you that you wouldn't even know had happened, because you can't really transfer a stage performance that way. I'm just thinking about that last week because when I did Rachel for Paul Newman, it was the first movie he directed. And in movies you don't usually rehearse, you just do it, and they call a rehearsal sitting around reading it. Most of the time you don't even do that. You get there and you do it. And we rehearsed that for 3 weeks in a big gymnasium marked out on the floor like a theater piece. But there was no audience. There was only the technicians for the movie. So that after those 3 weeks, when we got to do the movie, that movie has a kind of a depth in the characters, because we lived with them 3 weeks, but not where we were playing, but basically living with those characters as you do in a movie, when people talk about the different techniques. And it's completely different. I think if it was stage performance, it's impossible to translate that into a movie performance, even though I don't think there's much difference. I mean, in a movie, I'm talking to you. In a theater, I'm talking to you, but I'm talking to them. But Ethel Merman's a good example because she's so brilliant on the stage. And in the movie, somehow, she keeps doing that stage performance, partly because she's basically a musical person, but it doesn't work. It's a whole different thing. Like Wally says, I don't know. You could, I wouldn't advise you to go to school, Wally. I would advise you to work on the stage. I don't think you can learn to be an actor in school, thank heaven. You really have to work on the stage with people out there. And little by little, you become wonderful, if you have a gift. But it's not something you can really learn in classes.
But
it's
hard to get that experience. I mean, it's hard to...
We can talk about this later. I think we're running out of time, and I know I have to get these people in here also, the people out there, and find out what they want to know from you.
They come into view.
Are there any questions? I'm sure there are. Do you see hands?
Yes,
Okay,
there's a woman here with her hand
Okay,
up.
why don't you call them in? I'm always very bad at spotting hands out there.
Knowing that you're really good character actors to get into the role, how far do you push the envelope in order to be the character but draw attention to yourself as well, if you will, so that you notice?
Oh, that's interesting. Who's going to answer that?
Well, there are different schools of thought about that.
Tell the question.
Sorry, how far into the role do you push it before you lose the sense of yourself as a separate person? Am I doing you justice here?
If you push the envelope, so not only are you doing your role without detracting from the lead, if you will,
Yeah.
but so that you do the role, but you also draw attention to yourself.
So you get good reviews?
So you also draw, how much do you become the character, but also draw attention to yourself so you'll be noticed.
And also not, she said, detract from the performance of the lead. Look like it.
Say that.
I didn't hear that. No, but you know that there are schools that push the schools of thought about acting that push the envelope very far indeed. I know Estelle is a great student at the Actors Studio, and I think sometimes they push the envelope very far indeed. I don't know, is it Stella Adler? I just read this recently. She had a lifelong quarrel with Lee Strasberg about this. You're putting the actual experience of the emotions beyond every other consideration in the theater. And she left the group theater because of that. She said acting was no longer any fun for her. And when Lee Strasberg died, I have this on good authority, she came into her class and she said, "Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, a great man of the theater died today. I want us all to bow our heads in a moment of silent recognition of his importance." And so the class dutifully lowered their heads, and a long moment of silence followed. And before she came up, Stella Adler said, "And it will take 100 years to undo the damage he did." And I think this is really puts the thing in a nutshell. I mean, you can push it too far, and yet look what great things have come as a result of that.
But let's pursue one of those aspects of that question. If you are a better actor than the lead is somebody of the moment, as Estelle was describing earlier, and there you are pushing it to the fullest extent and overwhelming this less than adequate star. Are you doing a disservice to the production?
Somebody else take that one, because I don't think that way at all.
You don't?
No, if I'm playing a part, I'm not thinking I'm better than this guy. I'm relating to him as a person in real life. And supposing he's very bland in the role, supposing he's very even boring, you often meet people in life and you deal with that. You don't sit there and say, "I'm going to overwhelm this person."
But we have seen that where one actor is acting all over the place, and the other one is.
I think that's a consequence. That's an accidental consequence of something. I don't think he's setting, unless he's evil personified. I can't think anybody would work that way. I don't know. What do you think?
Never think about being noticed. I only think about.
You don't have to.
I only think about playing my character as fully as I can possibly play it, and if I'm noticed, that's great. And if I'm not noticed, I'm not noticed. I was in this play East Wind at Lincoln Center. It was the first new play they did there, and it was me and two men. And Walter Kerr never mentioned me in his review. So I wrote him a note and said, "You never mentioned me," and I was the only woman in this thing. It was about a British shopkeeper and his wife. And he said, "Well, I didn't really understand what you were doing, so I couldn't say anything." But I mean, it never occurred to me to make myself noticed. Now, I think Meryl Streep is very good at making herself noticed, and Kevin Kline is too. And I sort of suspect when I look at them that that's part of their agenda, which is fine because they're wonderful. But I don't have that agenda at all. I'm only interested in creating this character. If I were thinking about being noticed, since I'm a very private person, I would have to get off the stage.
That would be looked down upon. I mean, if you were, among the community of actors, that is considered, quite low if you are trying to, instead of being involved with the other actors, you're forming a kind of separate deal with the audience. That's looked down upon.
Lee Strasberg used to say there are two kinds of actors. The good ones work with the audience. the great ones work with the other actors in the audience.
In the audience.
The
What?
other act.
I missed the
And
last
the
one.
audience.
And the audience, okay.
The great actors work with the other actors and with the audience. In other words, actors who work only with actors are not actors,
Yeah,
because
can you
the
go back?
audience is there.
Another question? Go ahead.
Ms. Parsons, I thought you were so wonderful as Martha Mitchell in The Young
Thank
Guy
you.
Crystal. When you play a famous historical character like Mrs. Mitchell, do you have to prepare any differently than you do when you play a fictional character?
Well, I love that, yes. And I did with Bonnie and Clyde too. If I have the time, I do an awful lot of research, because I find that real life behavior is usually more extraordinary than actors' behavior, And so I learn an awful lot by research of real people. The woman I played in Bonnie and Clyde was a real person. And I spent a couple months, and a lot of the stuff that I did in the movie, I said to Arthur, this woman did this, and he would say, great. And so in a movie particularly, you don't have time to really develop your behavior and what you're going to do. So it's good. But that was, I did a lot of work about her.
We don't have a lot of time, so I want to get 2 or 3 more questions.
There's a
in
woman
here.
in a red dress there with a question.
Go ahead.
This might be another question about being noticed. I've read about instances where, in a series or in a movie, perhaps, you'll be doing work on a character, and maybe the director will find what you're doing is so interesting that your part gets expanded. And I was wondering if that's happened to any of the three of you, and is that good because you're really getting into the character, or is it bad because you're making yourself notice?
Well, in my case, I just think it's good acting. I was on Roseanne. I'd go like once a year or something, and then they said, hey, why don't you come on, to half of the shows? And then it got that I would be on a lot more than half of the shows, and they would give me more things to do, and they loved to write for me, and they, I got to play a nightclub singer. I got to play a lot of fun things. But I think it must be because I'm acting, because if I'm really trying to get attention, it's certainly an unconscious thing on my part. I'm just trying to play the characters as well as I know. Isn't that what you do?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you really shouldn't be thinking about sort of. Whether people are responding to you or they're going to give you a bigger part is sort of outside of the job that you're supposed to be doing, and I don't think many actors are thinking that way. Also, they wouldn't know. You cannot really scheme to.
All About Eve is not true?
I don't think that there's
I don't
much.
think I've had any experiences with people like that. I think Wally's right. Actors just don't do that, because in a way it dissipates. I'm working with a group of young actors now, and they're like that. They're trying to grab attention, and it just looks wrong. It looks wrong when you're watching it. You say, if you play your part, people will notice you. But if you're standing up there saying, watch me, I'm making bigger movements, I'm trying harder, it's a real turnoff. I don't think it's involved too much with professional acting. There was somebody back there. Yes.
I was wondering whether you have anything to say about why we don't develop a national theater here as we do in England.
She said, why, if we have anything to say about why we don't develop a national theater here the way they have one in England.
I don't know. I've been an actor for, 40 years now. And I once considered writing my memoirs and calling it Festivals I Have Opened and Closed. Because I have been through about 12 different attempts, each a budding group theater with its
Right.
own Harold Clurman and its own enthusiasm. And I've watched them go up and go down again. And I don't have any answer as to why that is, except that the culture simply doesn't accept it, isn't hospitable to it. Don't know why that is. We're unlucky that way.
Someone said, I've just been doing a lot of research on the group theater because we're going to do a month of their readings of their plays and evenings about what it was over at the studio in celebration of our 50th anniversary. And they pointed out that Americans are individualists. And one of the big problems is you can't get a group of actors together who will agree to stay together because they get an offer from Hollywood, which of course is what happened to Fran Chateau. They only broke that up. Then John Garfield went off. And it isn't even tried anymore. It's really sad because...
Well, Steppenwolf has tried it, and they've had the same problem in Chicago.
Yeah, right. They come back and they go and all that. Because working together with a group of actors all the time, they really function as actors. There's no more, oh, let's meet. What do you do? What do I do? How do you work up there? They can do anything once you get them working together for a year. They can really do anything. They pick up a script and they can start doing it, which is so different from the experience. But I wonder if it isn't true about our culture anyway, that we are individualists and we don't want to commit to a group. The group theater was, the oldest person was 33. That was Morris Karnofsky. So they were basically people in their 20s and it lasted 10 years. But I thought that might be true, that we're just a different kind of person than the European countries where they really flourish. But it's a terrible tragedy. We really should have we're so spread out too, with films out there, so that very little of our community is even left here. Only those of us that are diehard theater people are left here, which is another
And it
reason,
is,
I think.
I mean, today, the, to imagine starting a repertory theater in New York, you would be asking the, who would pay for it? It's very, very, very hard to imagine. Actors are, mostly people who want to live a bourgeois lifestyle. Very few are really eager to live, at least for long, as in a cell, like a monk. I mean, the people who work for Grotowski, this eccentric Polish director, they lived like monks, and they still, I think he works in Italy, and they all share a farmhouse and, have the life of a monk or a nun. Yep. And most actors have more bourgeois desires. And so you would be, the amount of money that people are paid to be on television or in a movie is 20 times what the actor would be making in that theater situation. So it's very hard to get the people to make that commitment. And unfortunately, I think England is different largely because it's a physically smaller country, and London,
they have a weaker film industry.
But also,
and they can do a film in the day and be on the stage at night. But of course, here you have to make a choice.
London is the center of film and television as well as theater. So, an actor can even be in the National Theater and still do television or film.
I just did a play with a woman who's very wonderful actress, leading actress, sort of in the regional theater, who was married to Ted Danson in college. And she figured up one night that he made more in one day than she had made in her entire life. That's crazy.
Should have kept on dating him. I want to thank you all for being with us today. Wallace Shawn, Fritz Weaver, Estelle Parsons, and remind you that we're going to have some more comparing notes events in the near future. We're going to have, I think the next one is about the people who decide what's the news. And then in March, French food with Julia Childs, Jacques Pepin, and Danielle Bouloud. They'll be comparing notes. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.